Welcome back to another episode of the Know Your Power podcast. I'm your host, Kendall Aaliyah.
And I'm Julia Renee. I'm already hungry.
I am too. I was just feeling my waist and I was like, oof, I have not eaten today.
I already ate and now I'm hungry again. Yeah.
Why are you checking the time to see when you can eat again?
Huh?
Prep life.
Yeah, because usually I have I'll eat at 8. I usually eat at 8 a.m. Mm-hmm. Then my second meal is at 11. I have certain times that I do at certain things, and my body knows it.
I feel like I look a little psychopathic on my YouTube channel because usually I'll show them my first meal of the day, and it'll sometimes be 4 p.m. But here's the thing: is I intermittent fast. Sometimes
you're used to it, so it's not weird.
Yeah.
Me, my body's on a schedule at eating a certain time, so I get hungry as soon as I wake up.
I feel like in prep for sure. I feel like you're insane if you're not getting hungry when you first wake up. But I sometimes eat at midnight, so then it's really only a 14-hour. Is that the math? Yeah, a 14-hour fast, which is a normal level of intermittent fasting. I'm not doing anything extreme, but I do feel like I come across like I am, but I'm not. Anyway.
You're a little crazy.
I'm a little psycho.
But honestly, I feel like intermittent fasting or just fasting in general, I've used it before as help for not being so food focused. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because sometimes when you're on prep, I've the main times that I've done fasting or anything has been on prep for just aiding and digestion, helping with that.
That's why I do it.
So that I don't have to constantly be digesting food. And then also it helps with the food, stop being so food focused, because when you're on prep, sometimes you're so hungry. All you're thinking about is the next meal. Mm-hmm. And then if you're fasting that day, you're just I don't need to think about it because I'm not going to have one.
The first of the year was a month after having a pretty bad stomach issue for a full month. And I talked about it here and there. It was traumatic for me where I was just aggressively bloated and in pain every day. So a month later, I was starting to develop not the best relationship with food again because I was almost scared to eat. And then yes, my whole brain was revolving around food again, which was so... I'd come so far from that I was okay, we got to find something. So the first of this year, I did a 24-hour fast. And I don't do those often, but once a year, once every 6 months. It is also really good for my gut health issues because I do have so much inflammation. And exactly that. I remember by the end of the day, I was oh, this is such a good reminder that food doesn't control what I do with my day. I had a great day and I didn't think about it once, you know? Not saying it's good to not think about food. You want to fuel your body. But having that good boundary with it is important.
Yeah, it's different when it's you're thinking, it's the only thing that you think about and you can't just do your regular day without being when is my next meal?
And we both had times where it's all we think about all day.
Yes, which is so consuming and annoying.
Yes.
But switching.
Yeah, I was this isn't what we're talking about at all today.
This isn't what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about the cycle of self-sabotage. So the reason that I wanted to talk about this is because I know that I have struggled with this a lot throughout my fitness journey, within my business life, my personal life. It can be so many different things that we self-sabotage. Same. And a lot of my clients have been struggling with this too, whether it's food related, workout related, personal life, all of those things. And so I kind of wanted to dive into it because it is a cycle. So when I'm talking about this today, I want you to think about this as kind of a little cycle going around and around. And what do you feel to you, Kenny, self-sabotage is?
As a definition?
What does it mean to you?
I think for me and the times it's come up in my life is when things are going well and my brain goes...
Let's book it up!
My brain goes, oh, things are going well. That means it's going to end soon.
Interesting.
And so I almost choose the bad decision, or I procrastinate the things I should be doing, or I do all of one bad choice after another until my life is no longer going well. So I do it to myself because I predict it coming anyway, if that makes sense.
So it's I'm not fired, I quit.
Yeah, no, exactly. So usually when I am self-sabotaging myself, and we'll go into like how it can look different for every person, but I'm like self-aware while I'm doing it. Like I realize I'm making the bad decision or the bad action or the bad whatever, or I'm not going after the thing that's right in front of me. For like, I'll make an excuse and I'm aware of that.
And that's part of the cycle is like the excuses that come with it.
Yep.
And one thing that I've realized with creating this like outline is how we manipulate ourselves so much into thinking and believing that we're not doing it. I know for me that I do that a lot because we'll use like an excuse to blanket it and we're like, no, it's not. It's because of this. That's why. And it's like, no, what's really under there?
Even if you have like a really good relationship with yourself, like I pride myself in being self-aware.
Yeah.
Like I am. And you find times where you're lying to yourself or that excuse that you're making that you believe wholeheartedly, you go, oh, it was an excuse.
Yeah,
like I was telling myself that.
It makes you feel better.
Yeah.
It's way better to put blame on something else than to look at yourself and be like, well, what's really going on? Why are we doing this? So the like actual definition is when people do or don't do things that block their success or prevent them from accomplishing their goals. So for example, say your goal is to lose 15 pounds. You know that you need to exercise, change your eating habits. However, you skip your workouts, you eat out with friends often. Those are self-sabotaging behaviors. Your behavior is skipping the gym and not following your meal plan, and it's causing you to not make progress on your goals. So when we go through this little cycle, I really want you guys to think about, number one, what is your goal? So think about that goal that you have right now. It doesn't have to be fitness related. It could be within your business, your personal life, your relationships, whatever you want to do. But the first part of the self-sabotage cycle is you actually set a goal. And you do this like with the best intentions and it feels so good. And you're like,
you do this on a high day where you're like, I believe in myself.
Yes. And then you're like, maybe it's like on a Sunday. I have a feeling that this happens a lot to people. It's like Sunday and you're like, tomorrow I'm changing everything.
Yep.
Tomorrow I will wake up at 5 a.m. I will eat chicken, rice, and broccoli all day.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do that. But you have the best intentions. You're excited. You know, we've all had that little spark of, motivation. And just think about what that is for you, whether it's like you want to compete in a show, you want to lose weight, you want to eat healthier. Maybe you want to stop doing a vice, maybe drinking or smoking or I don't know, whatever it is. And you're just so excited about it. And then the second part of the cycle is discomfort sets in. And this can be discomfort with the goal. So now that you have your goal, you start to feel like nervous or a little bit like uncomfortable with doing the things that it takes in order to achieve that goal. So for example, if you want to lose weight, there are certain things that you're going to have to do that are uncomfortable. Maybe you have to start doing cardio. Maybe you have to start eating in a caloric deficit. Maybe you can't order DoorDash every single day.
Yeah.
So
all these things that you're used to doing, you're changing your habits, which can be scary.
It's uncomfortable because you've been set in a certain way of doing things, like ordering DoorDash whenever you want it, not going to the gym, staying home and just watching TV all day or whatever, snoozing your alarm, waking up whenever you want, having those 100-calorie Starbucks drinks or I don't know.
Yeah.
100 calories is actually not a lot. Hundreds.
Multiple hundreds. This is, I would say, the most common place where that self-sabotage, like, rose-colored glasses come in, because you don't realize this pressure you're now putting on yourself, and you don't realize that some of these things are causing you anxiety and going to lead to self-destruction down the road. So this is like one of the most vital positions, I would say, where you choose how you view these things. You could go into a weight loss journey excited and looking forward to everything and focused on bettering yourself, or you can go in being like, oh, now I have to change this about myself, that about me. Like it depends how positively or negatively you view it in that moment.
Yeah, because you can easily, like Kendall was saying, be super excited about it. And then the more that you think about all the things that you're going to need to do in order to get there, it can seem like, oh, I'm at point A, but I need to get to Z, and it's so scary. You're like, but how am I going to fit the gym into my schedule?
Yeah.
How am I going to learn how to prep? How am I going to learn what macros to have? What are calories?
Yeah.
Like, what is all this? How do I grow my, like, once you think about all of those things, it can get really uncomfortable and cause you to self-sabotage, which is the next part of the cycle. And that's when your self-sabotaging behaviors come in. Sometimes that discomfort of growing past the person that you were causes you so much discomfort that you start to self-sabotage. And you start to do things that aren't actually in alignment with the goal that you intentionally set out for yourself. And that could be like snoozing your alarm, not setting out your clothes, not prepping your meals over the weekend. And of course, I'm using fitness examples, but what kind of ways do you feel like you self-sabotaged in your fitness journey?
See, I always was like the person where I was like, I don't self-sabotage because I was lying to myself and making those excuses.
I don't do that.
Just an example, I pulled out of my first show ever, and not like, oh, I changed my show. Like I stopped, like I abruptly stopped my prep that year because I got into my own head that I wasn't going to be ready on time, and that I was getting overwhelmed with finding a posing coach and buying a bikini and all of these things. And I used all of those as those excuses to self-sabotage, and that anxiety build up to just completely pull out of my show. And that had changed the trajectory of that entire year. Like I was literally 6 weeks out and decided to just stop. And then I fell into like that opposite hole of like eating out more, going out more, treating myself poorly because I wasn't upholding these goals for myself. So I would say that was like the biggest, because that was so early on in my career that kind of shaped how I viewed all preps after that, because I had essentially self-ruined my first prep ever.
Yeah, like that. You can see that the discomfort that you felt with realizing what it took to actually go on stage it's like piling up in your head, like the shoes, the suits, like all of those things. One thing that I always say is whenever I think about all of the bajillion steps it's going to take me to get to that goal, that's when I start freaking out and panicking.
Yeah.
And I'm more likely to sabotage versus if I think about, okay, well, what do I need to do just for today?
Yeah.
Like I started doing that yesterday, where I was on my way to the gym. I was having an incredible day, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to do this for another 8 more weeks.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to do this cardio and this thing. And I was like, I don't know if I can do it that long. And I was like, Julia, just focus on what you need to do today. And I feel better.
Because it's so easy to fall into that, and then that sends you into a spiral, and that's
self-sabotage.
what causes this whole cycle.
Yes, and there's so many different ways that we do this to ourselves with self-sabotage, like especially within your fitness journey, like not prepping your meals, so that when you don't prep your meals, you're like, oh, well, I don't have any meals now. I got to order DoorDash.
Yeah.
You hit snooze, or you just miss going to the gym for one day, and then it becomes 2 and becomes 3. There's so many things that happen in this part of the cycle, but I know one of the most common ones is with food. Like a lot of people self-sabotage with food. They feel that level of discomfort, maybe some feelings or emotions come up from their personal life, and then they turn to food in order to, try and make themselves feel better.
And you almost like justify it as like a means of like, this is going to comfort me.
Yes.
And then that's when it goes into the next step in this cycle, which is when the guilt sets in. And then that guilt just perpetuates more bad action, because now you're beating yourself up. You're not taking care of yourself. You view that you're already off track. So it's kind of like we got to F it now. Like if one thing's off track, I'm just going to give up entirely.
Yeah. And you start feeling angry at yourself for letting yourself like procrastinate, or for just giving up on your goal, and you feel like a failure. Of course the guilt and the shame like set in, and those are such low vibrations to feel, and they're really hard to get out of. And what I've realized with me, at least, when I perpetuate those feelings, and with reference to food especially, it just makes it worse. it doesn't make it any better.
Yeah.
So I know that like there's the tough love kind of that you do with yourself, but when you're in the low levels of like guilt and shame and like feeling like a failure, and you just keep saying that you are those things, it makes it worse, and you keep doing things.
It's like debilitating
to make you feel that way.
Yeah, and it makes you feel stuck. I'm very much so someone where like when any time I've used self-sabotage in my own life, most of the time it's not for fitness. I think just because I've been doing it long enough. Most of the time for me, it's like in my businesses or like in my work where that guilt feeling makes me not do something even more, if that makes sense. Like if I have something on my to-do list and it's been number one for a month, and every day I look at it and every day I don't do it, I feel guilt. The next day I go into it, not doing it even more, if that makes sense. Like that's the cycle I constantly find myself in, is like that guilt just keeps me stuck where I'm at. Like it's not helping anything, it's making it worse.
And I feel like what do you feel like is the number one way that you sabotage yourself? Is it procrastinating?
And procrastination. And like my anxiety causes me to avoid things. Like I think it's called like avoidant attachment style, and not just in relationships, like in anything I do. If something is causing me anxiety, I pretend it doesn't exist. Which means if I'm like just nervous, excitement, anxious for something I'm working on, I will still like halt all the work I'm doing because I feel that anxiety around it. Like I just kind of like restrict my progress basically because of that anxious feeling.
What's the other one? It was avoidant, anxious attachment. That's me. Whenever when
something causes you anxiety, you like run at it.
I like have to figure it out now. And if it's not fixed, like I panic and I go into like, and then you're like, nah, fam.
I'm never looking at that thing again.
I'm never doing it. I'm not doing it. Which neither swinging so far to one end, it like neither of them are healthy. You know what I mean? But yeah, that guilt really, if you let it consume you, like it really, really will. And we've all felt that way, where maybe I'm going to keep it back to fitness, or maybe we do procrastinate on an assignment and you're like, fuck, why did I do that to myself? Or you skip the gym and then you skip it again. You're like, I didn't need to do that. Like I was fine. Like I'm fine. Like I didn't really need to do that. Or you have a entire weekend where you just completely forget about your fitness goals and you go off track and you maybe binge eat or whatever, and you're like, why did I do that?
Yeah, and also so those things would be okay if you saw them for what they were and moved forward. But when you feel that guilt is when you stay living there, and then you're never gonna get back on track as long as you feel that guilt, because you're not gonna let yourself. You're gonna keep beating yourself up.
Exactly.
So like you can't just like really. It's like, oh, okay, I had a rough weekend. It's Monday. Let's get back to it. Versus Monday, you're like, just sitting there moping, beating yourself up. Like that's not getting back to it. That's staying in that weekend.
Yeah, because you're living in the past instead of thinking about, okay, where am I right now? And that's right. When we live in the past and we think about all of the things that we did wrong, that's where you feel depressed, like honestly. And if we don't move past it and say, okay, well, I'm accepting that this happened, because I really can't change it. The more that I ruminate on it, it's still not going to change. And then start again. Just start again. And the next part of the cycle is you make excuses for your behavior. So maybe it is the procrastinating thing, and you're like, well, the reason that I did that is because I just don't have any time. Like I don't have any time in my schedule.
It's like I know damn well I have time.
Or if like you're a perfectionist and that's the way that you sabotage, you're like, oh, well, it's just not perfect yet. It's not finished.
That's one I keep doing a lot too. Just to share like a personal, I know it's not fitness related, but again, you can tie this to any part of your life, and everyone tends to sadly self-sabotage in multiple parts of their life. With making my clothing line right now, there is a design that I think it's perfect, but every time I go to order bulk, I tell myself something's wrong with it and I need to go back in and fix that one thing. And it's like, if I just got out of my head for 1 second and just ordered it, I'd probably already have my stuff and it'd be for sale and my business would be running. But instead I'm pushing all of that back by making this excuse for myself, and then having that guilt of like, well, I haven't ordered it yet, so am I ever going to order it? Should I just scrap this? Like, it's just an endless loop.
That's so crazy. Like that we do that,
right?
Like you're literally trying to trick yourself in this thing.
And it's the worst when you're self-aware of it, because I'm aware that I'm doing that. But hopefully this is eye-opening to anyone listening, where sometimes you really are lying to yourself. And I know that sounds harsh, but like so aggressively that you don't realize you're actually self-sabotaging. So like hopefully listening to this helps you go, oh crap, I've been doing that with this one part of my fitness goal or this one thing at work or whatever that is.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things that came up when I was talking to my girls in the Know Your Power program was that ultimately a lot of them were sabotaging their own success. So when they see that goal like within reach, it's like you get so bogged down with either fear or like worry, or even what it ended up coming down to was like if they actually felt that they were worthy of achieving that goal and maybe they didn't, so they sabotaged themselves so that they wouldn't. The whole, no, I'm not fired, I quit. It's like, no. So I always like to think about it with competing. So say you're getting ready to compete on stage with a show. Maybe you are using the excuse of like, oh, it's scary. I can't pose. I can't go on stage. How am I going to do the diet, the cardio, training, all of that stuff? When really it's like, wait, do you actually feel like you're worthy of being on stage?
Are you actually just scared of
that
winning?
You deserve to be there like everybody else does. And now you're sabotaging yourself so that you don't even get there at all, which is
thinking
crazy.
About like little Kendall for her first show. That's absolutely what it was, where I was 17, I think, or 16 in my first prep, at least in the beginning or when I pulled out. And I think that's what I told myself is like, I knew the teen category was a thing and it was really small. And I was like, well, I don't want to be the only one on stage. Like that's a lot of pressure. So that's when those thoughts started. And then I was like, oh, and I could do open. And I was like, but to be the youngest one on stage, like that was the excuse I was telling myself, when in reality, I was just afraid to step on stage. Like I didn't think I was ready enough or like ready to be next to these other women and comparing myself.
And the excuses that we make us feel a little bit better because we're like, but it's because of this, it's because of this. And it like repairs our ego a little bit. It's so much easier to blame it on, oh, I don't want to do that because I don't want to be the only one. But really saying, no, I actually don't feel like I deserve to be there.
Yeah, it's those like more, the truth is harder to admit to ourselves.
Is. Being like, I don't have time versus, oh, I struggle with knowing my worth. Anyways, but yeah, the last part of the cycle is you repeat the cycle. You feel better about not making the progress because now it's not your fault. You've blamed it on like the time or it's just, my work schedule is busy. It's, competing. I'm sorry, I can't do that. I can't find the right coach. I just can't do it. And now you go in and you're like, okay, like let's make a better plan. And you just keep repeating the cycle. So I want to run through it again. The first one was like you set out your goal, whatever it is that you personally want. So keep thinking about that while you're listening to. Then the discomfort sets in, realizing, oh, I have to change things in order to reach this goal. Then you start self-sabotaging. Then you feel guilt about that self-sabotage. And then maybe you make some excuses for your behavior, and then the cycle repeats and you try and have a new plan. So how do you stop sabotaging yourself? How did you stop sabotaging yourself?
I think, and you have it written here, figuring out like what your self-sabotage tendencies are. I think when I realize that when I procrastinate or when I fall into that, it has to be perfect, I now realize that
like, oh,
yeah, that's a red flag for myself that goes off where I go, okay, you need to tackle this now, or apparently you never will, because that seems to be your cycle. So instead of recognizing that I'm anxious, avoidant, and then going, okay, so since I'm avoiding this thing, it has to be my number one priority, and I'm not doing anything else until I tackle this one thing. And even just those baby steps of like finishing that one task helps you finally like check off the things and be, what's the word? I guess be like loyal to yourself and your word and like start showing up for yourself.
Very true.
Yeah.
I feel like figuring out where your self-sabotaging behaviors are, because everyone's is going to be slightly different. First, figuring out like what you actually do for yourself, because then, like you said, it can be like that little red flag where you're like, oh, okay, this is a sign that there's something else that maybe I'm scared of.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm scared of like putting the order in because like what if nobody likes it? And then
Yeah.
what if I'm a failure? Like there's all these other things
And
that
I think
come.
it's funny because other people will notice it too, like the people you're around really often. And like I'm sure you notice some of the things I do to myself. But like my mom is one of those people, and I call her all the time, and she's like really supporting me. Again, back to like my clothing brand thing, because that's my current self-sabotage cycle. And every day she goes, "Did you order the bulk yet? Did you order the," like she just knows that that's like the thing I'm pushing off, and she's just like, "Why?" And she'll say why, and I'll give her an excuse like I always do. But recently I've been more honest with her, where I'm like, I'm terrified that this thing is either going to fail or be so successful that I'm not ready for like that success, you know? So I think it's just about being honest with yourself and the people around you too.
Yeah. And that can be very hard to do, especially because if you can't even admit it to yourself, admitting it to other people like is even harder. So first, finding your self-sabotaging behaviors, and then second, learning your triggers, because your triggers are behaviors or thoughts that happen prior to that feeling of discomfort. So like say that you self-sabotage with food. You self-sabotage your fitness journey or weight loss journey with food. And your trigger might be anytime that your schedule gets crazy busy and you have a lot of anxiety, you self-sabotage with food. So your trigger could be overworking yourself, too busy of a schedule. So by knowing these, now you'll know what to do when it comes up. Instead of going straight from anxiety to sabotage, you can go from anxiety to, okay, let me sit and figure out and journal, however you like to do it. If it's meditating on it, journal about it. What is actually going on? What caused me to feel this anxious, then wanting to self-sabotage? Because most of the time we just ignore it and blow past it. And then
that's something I did all the time, like post-show, like getting down on myself about my physique, and then I would turn to food to almost justify me feeling down about my physique. And I did have to start having those conversations with myself of like, hey, what's the root problem here? Because if every time you look in the mirror, you feel the need to binge or eat off plan or whatever that looks like, clearly there's something going on when you look in that mirror. So let's tackle that first. And once you're able to like rationalize your thoughts, which can sometimes honestly be really easy. Once you sit down and you're honest with yourself, you're like, oh, it's clearly this issue or that. It's like those are what is triggering me. Instead of just telling yourself it's when you look at yourself in the mirror, you know?
That's true. Because then you can also find little tools to help you now to help with those triggers. You know, if the thing was the mirror, one thing that I did with the mirror was put a sticky note on there that just said, stop body checking. Because it was so normal for me to body check and be like, oh, you're the worst. You look terrible. Look at this, look at that.
Isn't it crazy?
And sometimes you need that sticky note to be like, oh, just, okay. That's
like,
my
hey,
reminder.
you don't have to lift up your shirt every time.
Don't have to check yourself out every second, which bodybuilders, I feel like, have a really bad habit of that. And the third thing that we can do to help with self-sabotage is to create a new plan. So now that you know what your self-sabotaging behaviors are and you know what's triggering them, it's a lot easier to create a plan going forward, because now you know what to do if it comes up, because it's not about if it comes up, it's just when.
Yeah.
You know, we all do it. Maybe we go a significant amount of time without self-sabotaging ourselves, but these things always pop up. With personal growth or personal development, whatever you want to call it, it's not about eliminating all things that are bad. It's learning how to better deal with things when they do come up.
Yeah.
So
I feel like
you don't just ignore them.
this is really important. When I used to write down my goals, it was in that like beautiful lens of like, oh, I'm just going to lose 15 pounds. Easy. Now when I write out a goal, I write out exactly the steps I'm going to take to get that goal. That way my mind is prepared for like, okay, this first week I'm going to start integrating this, or I'm going to start taking this out. That way it's not what you were saying about competing, like a million things on your to-do list every single day. It's like, oh no, we're just going to tackle this one thing this week. Next week, maybe we can implement this on top of that. And that way I have steps actually planned out instead of going to my goals blind. And that's when I got really overwhelmed or overworked or fell into that cycle.
One thing at a time. Because then you feel confident about that one thing that you did, and you have more confidence to take on more, to take on more, to take on more. So you're like, oh, cool. I found myself a coach. Check. Next week. Okay, now I'm going to start implementing my new workout plan. Check. And you can start that confidence really starts to snowball, and you're like, man, I can actually handle a lot more now, which is pretty cool. So I wanted to give you guys some journal prompts that I gave my girls that I think will really, really help you. If that's something you want to do, if you're driving, don't write right now. If you're on the Stairmaster, you might be able to if you can use your phone on the Stairmaster. If you're at the gym, do it. Just do it. Put it in your notes section. So the first one is, do I think I'm worthy of success? Why or why not?
That's deep.
I was giving them time to write it. Number 2 is
pause.
some of my first signs of self-sabotaging are
I'm like thinking of my own mental list.
blank. 3, when I catch myself self-sabotaging, I will. So now we've figured out, first of all, let's go a little deeper. Like, do you feel that you're actually worthy of the success or achieving the goal in general? Why or why not? And then when we go into some of your first signs that you're self-sabotaging, now you know, like, okay, what are some of the behaviors? And then what do you do with those triggers or behaviors to stop yourself from doing it in the future? So I hope this helped, guys.
It helped me.
Yeah.
We all deal with self-sabotage, even if you're self-aware of it. And it's also like never too late if you're already in a goal. Don't feel like you have to restart and pick a new goal. You can just create a new plan for that goal and keep going.
You got this.
You got this.
So get out of your own way and stop self-sabotaging yourself. And as always, we love you all so much. And you're more powerful than you think.
Bye.